She's a Hawkeye. And so before we dive into Captain Marvel, I'm a former sports writer, so I've got to ask the question. Two questions here. We'll go to the first question, kind of a tougher topic. So the University of Iowa football family, which you were a member of, you played 5 years for the Hawkeyes. The Hawkeye football family lost a member over the weekend in Damon Bullock, someone who kind of dovetailed towards the end of your career. But it's unfortunately a topic that you know a little bit too much about. As you were entering the University of Iowa, an offensive lineman, Kyle Calloway, was a teammate of yours who passed away a few years ago. Tyler Sash, another teammate of yours who passed away, and now Damon Bullock. What does that happen to the fraternity when you hear news like that?
I mean, it's tough anytime somebody dies who you know. I think it's a little bit tougher when it's somebody that you've battled with, that you've been in the trenches with, that you've worked with. And these are all special guys. I mean, Callaway and I, played next to each other. He was a mentor and a guy that I really looked up to on that offensive line. Sash, obviously, we had some good seasons together. Played on opposite sides of the ball, but he was the kind of guy that you could always count on to make a big play in a big moment. And you kind of gravitate towards those people. And then Damon too, a guy that I was able to block for a little bit. You almost feel like that's like your little brother. Even as an offensive lineman, all the running backs, they're guys that you want to protect. They're smaller guys. Your job is to keep them clean, as it were. And to have a younger guy, that you had a relationship with, go down it's hard. It's hard to see that, and that fraternity that you kind of build, that brotherhood that you build on the gridiron, in the weight room, and in the film room, and just doing everything that we do together as football players. It's tough. It is like losing family.
And, one of the other common threads with those athletes, especially yourself, Callaway and Sash, is Callaway and yourself were coached by Reece Morgan, and Sash was recruited because he handled the state of Iowa, and with Tyler being an Oskaloosa, Iowan, and like so many other Iowa-born players in South Dakota, the Midwest players. Reece Morgan was your lead recruiter, and Coach Morgan, whom I got to know when I was early on in my coaching career, announced his retirement yesterday. And so we do have Hawkeye fans who listen. I have to ask the question. I've got a former offensive lineman who played for Reece Morgan. What was it like playing for Reece, and how happy are you for him that he's able to kind of go out on his own terms?
I mean, I guess I'm happy for him. It's that double-edged sword where he's one of those guys that you hope against hope that he hangs around long enough that if my son went to the University of Iowa, I would want Reece Morgan to be his coach.
That he'd be like 85. Though.
He'd be so old, but I would still. But it's one of those things, like if anybody, if you want to give anybody an immortal robot body to just live forever and continue to teach, and build those relationships, it's Reece. So I mean, playing under him was awesome. Getting recruited by him was awesome. I've likened it to building a relationship where a lot of other schools will come in and it's more of a sales pitch. This is our school, these are our credentials, this is what we do, this is how you would fit, this is why you should come here. And with Reece, he was all about just getting to know you, and not just you, but your family, your friends, your history. He genuinely cared so much about every single guy that he coached. Even after your career was over, you'd go in there and he, you'd find out that he'd been keeping tabs. Oh, how's the new baby? How's your mom doing? Is she still at that job? Blah, blah, blah. So it was, you weren't getting a sales pitch with him. You were being welcomed into a family, and it really made a big difference in the way that he recruited you.
And for me, as a fan, but also as someone who has coached and being around the Iowa staff, just strictly from a surface view, it seems like that's a culture that's really been built, starting with Kirk Ferentz and Reece Morgan. Obviously has a huge part to do with that. He was on one of the wasn't on the first staff, but was one of the first hires after, Kirk had established himself there. In 2000, I think, is when he left after he won 3 straight state titles at Iowa City West, which I don't think people remember how Iowa City West was an abysmal program until Reece Morgan got there. What Iowa football fans may know today, that's not the Iowa City West that Reece Morgan walked into. And so that's, I think, the joke that some of my friends in the coaching profession have always made, that Gary Barta, the athletic director at Iowa, could have hired Reece Morgan to be the head volleyball coach a few years ago, and they would have been good. He's just a good coach. He could coach the dance team probably, and they'd be successful.
Yeah, I used to say he would coach, national champions in underwater basket weaving if you let him. I mean, the guy was he was the ultimate teacher. Every position that he coached had All-Americans, had national award winners, had first-round draft picks. Just unbelievable success, and it just stemmed from the kind of person that he was and the relationships that he built and his genuine caring and longing to see every single player reach whatever their maximum potential was. He was going to get you there.
We saw it this weekend. If you watched the NFL Combine, Anthony Nelson, defensive lineman for the Hawkeyes, really showed out in Indianapolis over the weekend, and was a guy who has a lot of physical tools, but you can tell was well prepared in his time at Iowa. We could do a whole separate sports podcast.